Welcome to the inaugural Making Men Better series. I'm excited about our guests today. We're going to be chatting about discomfort and having uncomfortable conversations. All right, my guest today is a good friend. He is the founder of Making Men Better and makingmenbetter.com. Alan Reed, welcome to the show.
It's good to be here. Thanks.
So glad we had a conversation earlier in this week, and I think you'll agree that we both got so excited talking about this, and we ran out of time. And at the very end, I said, let's talk about this some more, because I wasn't done. I went home and I talked about it with other people, and I was so excited about our conversation. So we decided to do this today and talk a little bit more on uncomfortable feelings and having uncomfortable conversations. But before we get into that, share a little bit about yourself with the listeners.
Yeah, I've lived in Colorado most of my life. There's been a few times that I lived outside. I lived in British Columbia for a while, which was a kind of an interesting and amazing experience. I took a youth pastor position there. So that was my first job that came out of my seminary education. So I'm seminary trained, which I love to say that, in that it didn't really help me a lot with life.
Like my economics degree.
That's right. Most of it's been through, seeking out the difficult or discomfort. But just to kind of get you current, I live in Castle Rock and with my wife and 5-year-old. So I am 60 years old, 61 as of yesterday. And
happy birthday.
Thank you. I didn't mention that to you.
No, you didn't.
But my wife and I were surprised by a baby. And that was 5 years ago. And her name is Lorelei. And I got to tell you, at the time, that created a lot of discomfort.
I'm sure.
Just because it wasn't expected. And it's been the most amazing journey since that time. So I am involved in a church downtown where I'm on staff as their formations pastor, which means I care for the pastoral team. And I zero in on prayer, how prayer can have a high impact in the lives of people.
Awesome. So
that's kind of a winding road to talk about me, but that gives you a little bit of an idea.
Yeah. So which leads me, and kids are a blessing, right? They keep us young, even if we're old guys. and so you were divorced and you're remarried. And so the listeners know that you've been through this process, a lot of them that they're going through now, currently going through, and some that are past and learning to live life after divorce as well. And so the prayer part is where we started to talk about this discomfort and feelings of discomfort and what they mean. And so, like we talked about before, this just was a theme this week. And then I was reading my children's devotional this morning, and I wanted to read something just to kind of prompt our conversation. And that was, as much as we and our children might like to receive divine messages telling us specifically what to do and where to go, nothing in the Bible indicates that God guides us in this way. Just because God spoke in a certain way to particular believers at one point in redemption history doesn't mean that's the way he speaks to ordinary believers today. So I thought that was amazing and so appropriate because of our conversation talking about, hey, I would love if God would just speak to me every day and tell me what I'm supposed to be doing, what direction I'm supposed to be going, and make sense of it all, like I try to do with my daughters, and explain, this is kind of what life's about, and this is kind of what we're doing. Not that I even have any semblance of an idea around this, but it comes in much different and more subtle ways. And that's where we started talking, because I was talking from the coaching perspective and these uncomfortable feelings. And you're talking from your men's work and the group that you host and you work with, and from a biblical perspective. So let's jump into that discomfort and those feelings of discomfort, and why that is important to pay attention.
Mhm. Well, simply from an understanding, as we have the Bible to give us a picture of what happened in the fall. That I call it being born again backwards.
Ha,
We were in life, and then we came out of it, and the coming out of it had created such confusion around identity, who we really are,
mm,
which had to, if you think about it, create an incredible amount of discomfort.
right.
Um, we knew that there was a God that loved us, but the relationship felt terribly wrong at that point. There was something I think Adam and Eve must have wanted to remember, but they couldn't.
Right.
Something of their value, something of their intrinsic worth to God, and it was tainted by now shame and all these other things that were really uncomfortable.
Right, right. And so, and for our listeners that might not be religious or spiritual, I want to encourage you to hang on here, because we're going to be approaching this from two perspectives, right? The biblical perspective, also from the real life perspective. Not real life, because biblical is real life too, but from a life perspective of experience in how those feelings come up. So what you just described was, the story of Adam and Eve and having that discomfort, and why that comes up, and us forgetting kind of our identity. And I think during divorce, particularly, at least that was my experience, and you can speak to this too. And but I hear a lot from the men that I work with, is it's a time of questioning our identity, our feelings, kind of similar to what you just described with the Adam and Eve story. And so it's good to pay attention to that discomfort, because it's probably telling you something. Would you agree?
Yeah, I most definitely agree. And uh, the thing that's interesting about it is, I think our culture doesn't really have appreciate discomfort.
Yes.
Uh, it seems like with everything that's going on today, I talk to men, and they're typically got their ways of dealing with it. But it seems like a lot of the ways that we deal with discomfort today is to medicate.
Yeah.
And so that might be television, it might be drinking. It's ways that we kind of give ourselves a way to escape things
Right.
that are hard. For me, having been, I can tell you, 25 years of marriage, going back to your original thought on identity. When we got divorced, I wasn't sure really who I was
Yeah.
outside of being a married person. That had been so much a part of my youth and into my adult years that it was extremely uncomfortable. And the how I had learned to face discomfort was medication.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So a
And that
number of
could,
ways.
yep, yeah, in a number of ways. And it seems like what you just described is our entire society is structured to allow us to either numb or ignore, or just just put it off. And it's happening for a reason in us. And it's almost as if if you feel discomfort, it's probably something that you should be paying attention to, no matter what that discomfort. It could be personal in a divorce. It could be professional. It could be just it could be, maybe you could argue more most importantly, spiritual, right? Just a discomfort in your spirit about anything that might be happening, or decisions that you might be making, or stuff that's going on in your life. And that seems to be our greatest challenge, is to figure out what to do when we feel this discomfort. So what would be, I mean, what are some things that we can do that we can, you know, that we can start paying attention to this discomfort?
I like what you said. How do we pay attention to discomfort? And I think for many years of my life, I stayed unaware of it. And so you and I
Mm,
talked yesterday about a red flag or the signal that your body gives to discomfort. It, could be anxiety. It
yeah.
could be a number of things. But first of all, being aware. And um, there's this little gap of time that you have between being aware of discomfort and your decision to go comfort.
Yes. Right.
And so that little window is kind of it's a precious moment that you're able to make a decision in which direction you're going to take that.
Right.
So being aware, I would say, is number one. What would you say?
Yeah, I agree. I think some people call it being the conscious observer of our minds, because we've got these big brains, right? That are we're so smart, but we're actually not. But we're constant. We've got how many millions of thoughts they say we've got coming through our brains, our minds every single day, and oftentimes, and probably a whole ton of them are just not true, are just not true, are just not right decisions, or not. So being that conscious observer, or in what you described as paying attention to them, allows us to take that time, right? To just stop. Like, and even and maybe it's just that discomfort's an emotion, right? I think that is one, particularly during the divorce process for me, and for lots that I talk about, lots of men that I talk with, is that emotions just come up like out of the blue.
Mhm.
And that's a sign, right? That's an uncomfortable sign. That's, you need to be paying attention to something, because it's telling you to stop and really think about that. So what do we do? What do we do if that just comes up? And like, but there's all kinds of other signs, and we could probably talk about that for hours, but I think that's a good one to talk about, because especially during the divorce process, and then also being one, like, no matter what, we always have these emotions coming up at whatever point we are in our lives. And it seems like something's going to trigger something all the time. Like when you and I were talking the other day, you said, yeah, I just had this thought of, I need to go buy a shirt, right? At the mall, but really I didn't need a shirt. So I had to
Very
stop.
interesting.
Yeah. I had to stop and think, why is my mind telling me, what is it, what is that discomfort that's coming up that's making me go shop my way around? So, what can we do, like, to deal with that?
I like what you said, that there are things that cross our mind, especially when we're in trauma,
Yeah.
dealing with something that's painful, that we don't tend to question, and we
Yeah.
probably should.
Right.
Even asking the question, is that my thought? Is that really the truest sense of who I am?
Mm,
Or is it being informed by my pain, or
yeah.
by something that's been triggered inside of me? And so this is just my personal experience on this. Um, I think one of the things that we can do is doubt our logic or challenge our logic process,
Yeah.
and really question whether that's true. I don't know about you, but I find that I deal with a series of false narratives that are running around in my head, and some of those are informed by early belief systems. For example,
Yeah.
I was raised in a broken home. My parents got divorced. So somehow, in the process of dealing with that, um, it impacted my ability to trust adults.
Okay.
So you spin that forward into my adult life, and there are times when I get a triggering thought, or the fact that my wife left me,
Right.
um, and it sets off these false narratives. So things that just aren't true. So I think you doubt the things that you're thinking, you challenge them, and you question whether they're true. Because once you start that process, um, um, it gives you the opportunity to be aware. But then I would add to that, and this what helped me was I would call a friend
Yeah.
and I'd ask them to process my thought process.
Right.
Very
Right.
helpful.
Right. Yeah. So doing something with it. So the first part being, consciously pay attention to your activities, your choices, what you're doing, maybe your lifestyle, whatever that, your thoughts, whatever that may be. And where there is something that's uncomfortable, start to say to yourself, okay, um, what is that discomfort? Oh, I'm wanting to go, I'm wanting to go shop, or I wanted to go drink, or I wanted to, whatever, whatever we might be doing to push things down, and then say, okay, well, what is that? What is that feeling? What, how do I, why do I believe that? Right? Maybe the feeling, like you just described, is, am I not trusting somebody? Maybe that's the feeling that's coming up, and then process it, right? So being aware of it and processing it is two different things. And we talked about
Yeah.
this also, which is, okay, it's great to be aware of it, but what do you do with it? What do you do with it once you're aware of it? Because that's where, this whole concept of having knowledge but not doing anything with it, it doesn't really help you, because you need to have some action involved with it. So then taking it, like you said, like
Well,
doing
here's what
something.
I would say. I will start with what you don't do with it.
Okay. Yeah, that's good too. All right. I like that.
So most of us guys have, for whatever reason, believe that we ought to work on ourselves or deal with a particular stress internally.
Mm,
And so what you don't want to do with it is isolate.
yeah.
Isolation just doesn't really serve any kind of good purpose because for me anyway, it keeps me spinning. And
Yeah.
if it's a relationship where I have felt misunderstood, unseen, unheard, then my tendency is to really sort of start a dialogue with myself and that person or the situation that doesn't leave me feeling connected. It leaves me feeling disconnected.
Yes.
So what they'll say in AA, which is a program that deals with a lot of discomfort, is that when you have something like that going on, the first trigger response from being aware to what you do with it is you reach out so
Yeah.
that you're not isolated in that moment. So I think it's been an excellent tool. It's hard. It takes some courage to do it, but you ought to do it.
Yeah, that's huge. And that's a fantastic point, because that is uncomfortable. But even if you simply have a friend to talk to, now it's not always, friends don't always have the greatest advice, but at least getting that, so it's uncomfortable, right? It's discomfort. You're feeling this. Having somebody to talk to about this is huge, because then, instead of, like you said, we start, like, and as guys, right, we think we can figure it out. We think we can, process this. We're linear. We're going to think about it. And sometimes it's just, you can't, because we got this programming, like you described, from our childhood, our early adulthood, that it's not hitting right. Right. It's the neurons, or the programming is not programmed right. So the computer's not working right. So you can't think your way out of stuff like this. So staying isolated, it's like a bad program, that a bad computer program, just keep going over and looping over and over again. You got to do something to get out of that. And so you described also 12-step groups. There's a lot. So if you don't have the ability to get to a therapist or a coach or hire one, there are all kinds of opportunities outside of even friends, like a 12-step groups, AA or Al-Anon or Codependence Anonymous, or any one of those groups that are sharing and talking to each other about this stuff. And it's a systematic way that helps us to go through that. Or church, lots of churches have not only those groups, but other support groups for singles or divorced people, et cetera. Another great place to find support, or the Divorced Dads group, or the Making Men Better, Valor groups, that you can talk about this stuff, because then what you said, then you start to see the difference in what you're thinking and what's actually happening.
Mm-hmm. And it may seem like a small thing, but when you make that phone call, very important phone call, when you reach out, we oftentimes we're in a place where we're kind of consumed with what our thoughts are on in the moment. And so it's just a good tip that when you call and reach out to somebody, to ask them how they're doing and be interested in what's going on with them. And the reason why you do that is it creates a connection. And men, there's all these chemicals that happen in our brains, but one of them is serotonin. And when there's a mutual connection that happens, it triggers serotonin in the brain, and actually allows you to feel like whatever is uncomfortable in your thought process actually receives a little bit of attention from your body to say it's going to be okay. You're going to be able to make it through this.
Yeah.
And that you're not just a taker, but you're a giver.
Right. Well, let's talk about both aspects of that also, which is, how do you bring that up with somebody that you're feeling uncomfortable, you need to have a conversation? How do you bring that up with somebody or a friend that you just need to talk?
You could set the stage ahead of time and just say, listen, I'm going through a lot right now, for if it's a divorce. I've got all kinds of crazy thoughts. Would it be okay if I'm having a crazy moment,
right?
reach out to you and just process that a bit with you?
Yeah. And then on the other side of that, if you have a friend that comes to you, being open in asking about, and this is a tough one for guys, that I find it was really tough for me for a very long time, but ask about their feelings, right? Ask about, how are you feeling? And then open that door, because that kind of creates space. So if you know somebody that is going through something, asking about how they're feeling, and if that is fine, or it's a one-word answer, it's probably not, because they're not sharing deeply or past the surface level what they're going through. And then you can say something to the effect of, well, I know what good is to me, but what is good to you?
Yeah, that's a great one.
Right? Because good to me might be something, but good to them might be that they're not doing real good, that they're barely getting by, and are on the brink of doing something very bad. So creating that space is a good way to do that too, if you know somebody.
Yeah, and just to tag on to that is that in our culture we've become poor listeners.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So when men are famous at wanting to fix something, wanting to give advice, and we actually think you're calling us, if that's what's been set up, to get some of our excellent advice. And not that we don't have it, but oftentimes when somebody's going through something that is painful or traumatic, what they're needing in that moment is more of a active listening.
Right.
So it's real easy. If you just Google active listening, it'll
Yes.
bring up suggestions for good questions that you can ask somebody that's going through something. And it's actually a lot more engaging and connecting to them. Unless they're asking you specifically for advice, active listening is a good way of engaging.
Yeah. That's a great point. And that's something maybe we can talk about in another Making Men Better episode, and talk about how to do active listening, because that's a great one. And that helps not only in this specific circumstance, but that can help with our children, with our future relationships, with our future romantic relationships, our future relationships in business, or business relationships, or relationships with friends and other men. It's always a huge tool that would be beneficial.
Mhm.
So let's talk about some other ideas around what to do with those uncomfortable feelings, and one that I have found, and that I talked about, that I resisted for, and I reiterate it again, like I do almost every day. I've resisted and like struggled with all of this stuff that we talk about all the time on this podcast, but this too, the uncomfortable feelings. But one of them for me, well, obviously the first one was just numbing and ignoring. But once I got past that, in trying to get it out and figure it out, one of them that I've found now that I just can't imagine living without is journaling. Like talking, like getting out pen to pen. And there's something about getting pen to paper that's different than just having conversation that really helps figure this out in journaling. And I don't know if you do journaling, or if you talk with your men about journaling, but that is one that's been huge for me.
I've had times when I did it, but I've also talked to many guys that are working through things that journaling's great. And they've also talked about the idea of not to, this is a quote out of a book, but it's when you're angry about something that you write down what's called a shitty rough draft.
Right.
Right? Before you actually go and communicate or anything like that. And journaling is a way of helping you get out your thinking quickly on a page, so that you have a chance to go back and look at it and go, all right, well, there's probably a better version of this.
Yeah.
But,
yeah. And that's what I seem to find, at least it helps me, because so it feels like women are able to just call each other, and then they can just, I don't want to say blah, 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 but they can just like riff and talk and emote. And then like it's a process for them that's nonlinear, right? Which for men isn't necessarily as conducive or as comfortable. So what I find is journaling first helps me then to call Alan and say, hey, I'm going through something, and I'd love to chat if you would have some time. But then it helps me like put my thoughts in order and really feel like I have a meaningful conversation, and not like just talking all around the edges until I dial into it. So that's the process, at least that I've found. And I've found that other men have found helpful, is really, putting it down on paper and being able to do that, and then start having that conversation.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Another one for me is that I'll write at the beginning of the day, I'll write something that says, what 3 courageous actions am I going to do today?
I like that.
And oftentimes that's just the flip of something that's uncomfortable. They don't have to be heroic necessarily. They might just be, there's something that I've been avoiding because it triggers me or it feels painful. I don't want to do it. And so part of the 3, I start my day off with those 3 courageous actions. And that really sets me up to see that when I face discomfort, it's courageous, and it's something that's honorable. And so having gone through a lot of pain as a child and adopting coping mechanisms around trying to be comfortable,
right,
bringing that into your adult life is not good.
Right.
I think a lot of us struggle again with the idea of comforting. So a strategy is to see, maybe it's 3 courageous acts. Maybe it's you saying to yourself, I'm going to seek out discomfort with a purpose in mind.
Ooh, that's a good one.
That it is a courageous thing to do, that I'm going to grow because I do this.
That's like graduate level. I'm going to seek discomfort today. I don't know about you, but I don't think I'm at that level. I'm not seeking.
I've heard guys go, yeah, I don't know about that one at all, but it tends to wake us up to the idea that seeking discomfort actually is great self-care. That God created us with this capacity to be a winner.
Yeah.
And when we give way to comfort, it's kind of like we're waving the white flag on the day. you know, that I can't expect anything more from myself. And here's what I know. Again, the chemicals of the brain, there's the reward system that comes from you seeking discomfort and actually accomplishing and being able to check it off your list for the day is
Yeah.
significant. It's really powerful.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. I feel like now when discomfort comes up, I at least welcome it, seeking it out. But that's a great point too, is our lives aren't necessarily meant or designed, and why we're here to just passively have happiness and comfort. It's
Mhm.
it There is exactly what you just described, something to be said for having that discomfort, dealing with it, finding a solution, overcoming it, and then moving on with
Yeah,
life, which
yeah,
is really, really phenomenal. And to the men that are listening today that are in the midst of the divorce, you can attest to, I can attest to that down the road, when you get through this, because you will get through this, because you are strong enough to get through this, there
absolutely.
is a life after divorce, a life two, some guys call it 2.0, after this, that is absolutely even more fulfilling than you could have ever imagined, provided you do the work and you
That,
make the effort that you were talking about, of paying attention and, you know, figuring out solutions to what's coming up. I wanted to finish with one more thing, and that was, what happens if you don't pay attention to these uncomfortable things that are coming up, these feelings, this discomfort in your spirit, whatever, like we described in the beginning of the show. What can happen? What happens?
well, for me, it's a kind of mental break. Let me describe that. So when I'm not paying attention, I find that my mind disassociates.
Hmm.
So this might not happen to you, but I miss things. Everything from when I'm driving, I might miss an exit. And
Yeah.
really, what's going on is this inner dialogue
Right.
uh, of me wrestling with something that I would prefer not to. And so facing the truth about it and seeing it as something that I can press through ends up being a time waster. I find myself less effective. So one of the outcomes of not dealing with discomfort is that you waste time during the day that you could be sharper, more clear, more alert. But number two for me is that I tend to, especially by the end of the day, if I haven't faced into a difficult thing and been courageous, I tend to be less connected in my relationships, a little more isolated,
Right.
um, a little less aware of how it's impacted me, but emotionally I'm more exhausted. So that's the impact, in my opinion and in my experience, of not.
Right. Right. Which leads me to two things. One is that, so once you've identified you're uncomfortable and then you start to do something around, dealing with that, the next part to really understand what you need to do, for me at least, and is to
Mm,
get quiet. And that might be meditation, it might be prayer, and just really listen in. And this is where we come full circle to where, in the beginning of the devotional, it's not, you maybe you get a voice from God. Some people do. Maybe it's something else. There's all kinds of prompts out there that are going to help you to decide the direction in which you should be moving. The one that is going to make your heart feel good, the one that is going to make your spirit full, and that you're going to the decision that you're going to want to make around that. But that will only happen if you can get quiet and then pay attention to the signs of what you're supposed to be doing, and the dialogue inside, or the direction um, that you're being moved by God, or whatever that is for you. in order to move forward. Can you speak to that?
I can. Getting quiet is become more important to me. I think that it's not easy to do. I don't know about you, but talk radio, sports radio, just something filling space when I'm driving. When I get home, there's always the TV. There's this. Here's an interesting thing. I think it's uncomfortable to be quiet.
Yeah.
And so this might be one of the best things we leave people with today. Guys, are that here's an action step to leave with, is that if you feel uncomfortable being quiet, not having noise and TV or radio or whatever it is, that could be a sign. That's an awareness tool. The very thing that will bring you into move you forward in this is to be quiet, to take a moment and to listen, maybe to journal as a way of resetting yourself for the day.
Absolutely. And I'll take that one step further, which is schedule that time to be quiet. Schedule that time for prayer, schedule that time for meditation, schedule that whatever it is for you that you want to do in order to get quiet, to pay attention to that stuff. Schedule it. Like, for instance, I schedule it in the morning for, as I wake up first thing, and then last thing at night, so that I can, prepare in the morning for my day and review at night what my day has entailed. And so doing that, if you make it intentional, then you're going to be, everything we just described, the whole process is going to be much easier for you to go through.
And then one last thing, what you think about in your quiet time is pretty important too. So I can't trust my own thoughts, especially when I'm going through a difficult time or I'm stressed out. What I found that's helpful for me is that I focus on, in my experience, what God says about me. What I say about myself probably is not accurate at that time. So I use God as a reference point. I go to the scriptures. You could Google, who I am in Christ or the promises of God, and then you just read through those things. So it's important that you anchor your thoughts to something that's true and come out of untruth. If you're not yet there in terms of your spiritual life, there are a lot of positive thinking ways to get yourself thinking about things. And one of the things that I use is the things that I really want to be or become. I use an expression that I make statements as if it were so.
Right.
So if I'm struggling with impatience and anger, I go, I am a patient person.
Nice.
And I'm not an angry person. This is not true of the true me.
Right.
So I'm going to begin to declare with my mouth the things that are true. And that actually it causes that quiet time to have some content and some meaning to it versus just kind of free floating.
Right.
Your quiet time.
Right. Instead of just thinking about the ball game scores or or whatever else went on during your day. I love it. That's great advice. Alan Reed, thank you so much for being here today. Tell us a little bit about how we can connect with you and connect with Making Men Better.
Making Men Better is an organization that's designed to call men up. In our times when we seem marginalized and there's a lot of confusion, men are still great, and we need to believe that. So our organization calls them up and really calls them up to their original design, how we were designed to be successful and to be courageous and to really invest in people. So that the organization, you can find out more about us by going to makingmenbetter.org. And that's the website, and you can see a little bit about the activities that we're involved in. We're about small groups, we're about large groups, We're about retreats and gatherings and mentoring. Very strong component in mentoring as we can begin to help call each other up by recognizing that all of us can be pretty effective mentors if we would just begin to believe that about who we are.
Absolutely. So I encourage everybody to check out makingmenbetter.org. Get involved in a Valor group. If there's not a Valor group around, you could start a Valor group where you're at and talk to Alan about that. And that's exactly what we've been talking about through this whole show, which is, help make men better. And we're doing that. And I love what you said about, we don't hear about the glory of how great men are these days. And we need to hear that. And I want to remind everybody out there listening to that, you are valuable. You are needed. You are loved and appreciated. And so don't forget that. And if you do, connect with us here, connect with Alan. And if you found some value in the show today, please like us, please subscribe. Take a moment and leave a short review of the show. That helps as well. And most importantly, share it with somebody else, because there's other people going through stuff, other men going through stuff and divorce. And the more we share and more we get this out, the more people we're able to help. Alan Reed, thanks so much. It was such a pleasure.
My pleasure.